Why did she lower the rifle when the perfect shot was lined up in her scope? The buck stood in the clearing, its breath steaming in the mountain chill, unaware that it had been marked. Catherine Harrington's finger rested on the trigger, her breathing calm, every muscle stilled into the rhythm she had trained since childhood. At 300 yards it was nothing. A simple squeeze, a clean hit. She had killed before. She knew the discipline. She knew the weight. But today something in her chest resisted. Her whisper broke the silence. Not today. The rifle lowered. The buck's ears twitched, sensing a shift, then bounded away into the undergrowth, leaving Catherine alone with her restraint. She exhaled, a faint smile crossing her lips. The Blue Ridge Mountains had taught her many lessons, but none more important than this. Killing was not a sport. It was survival. It was necessity. And sometimes it was mercy. The smoke from her family's cabin curled faintly against the pale morning sky as she approached. It had always been more fortress than home, 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, 20 from town. Her grandfather Robert Harrington waited on the porch, his frame still rigid with soldier's discipline despite the 78 years behind him. His eyes, sharp and assessing, had already read the truth before he asked the question. "No, dear." "I let him walk," Catherine answered, carefully racking the rifle into place. Robert nodded once, a flicker of approval. "Your grandmother always said, we take only what we need." Inside, the smell of biscuits lingered. Her grandmother Martha, silent grace woven into every movement, moved between stove and counter, silver braid trailing down her back. 75 and still faster than most people half her age. Catherine had grown up under that gaze, tracking deer instead of watching cartoons, learning to navigate by the stars instead of playing video games. Childhood had not been ordinary here. It had been preparation. But preparation for what? That question haunted her, more with each passing year. The living room bore the weight of legacy, hand-carved furniture, family photos, military commendations. Yet it was the map that always pulled her eyes, dotted pins across the world, some routine deployments, others marked in red, darker, unspoken. Her grandfather rarely explained those. Robert's voice broke the silence. "Your father would have been 55 today." The photo stared back at her. Captain James Harrington, desert uniform, forever frozen at 32. Catherine felt that familiar ache, fragments of memory, a laugh, arms lifting her high, the scent of pine and gun oil. He had been killed during Desert Storm. At least that was the story. "Do you ever think about telling me the truth?" she asked softly. Robert's expression didn't move. Only his eyes flickered, those same green eyes she had inherited. Some truths are better left buried, kitty cat. She hated the nickname, and yet only he could use it, especially when secrets pressed against the silence. Martha's entrance lightened the air for a moment. Herbs in her arms, soft teasing about serious talk before breakfast. Catherine forced a smile, but the unease never left. Breakfast passed in quiet reflection, biscuits, coffee, the routine of family, but beneath it, the unspoken stretched wide. Afterward, Robert beckoned. A shed behind the cabin, a heavy padlock, a trunk hidden beneath a tarp. His hand trembled just slightly as he pulled the cover away. "This belonged to your father." Inside, papers, maps, photographs, a wooden box, a medal nestled in velvet. Catherine's breath caught, a silver star. But the date didn't match, awarded 2 months before his death. Robert's jaw tightened. "There's a lot about your father's service that never made it into the official record." Her pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" He handed her a folder. The words on the cover were faded but clear. Unit 8118, Phantom Protocol. Catherine's world tilted. "You were part of this." "I helped create it," Robert admitted. "Operatives who didn't exist, missions that never happened, ghosts in the dark." He glanced toward the door, toward the mountains. "And your father was one of us." The truth was a weight she had long suspected but never held. The routine bombing raid, a lie. Her father had died in a classified extraction mission, a defector, a code name, Blackthorn. Her voice trembled. Why now? Because history repeats itself, Robert said, his eyes locked on hers, and because someone has been asking questions about Blackthorn again. Martha's voice slipped in quietly. Tell her, Robert, she deserves to know. And so the layers unfolded. A hidden bunker beneath the shed, shelves of supplies, weapons, encrypted devices, emergency passports, routes, names, insurance. Robert had lived his retirement in shadows, waiting for the circle to close again. When he placed the old dog tag in her hand, Catherine felt her inheritance, darker metal, an emblem of a bird of prey, a designation, 81P27. Your father's mark, Robert whispered. The weight in her palm was more than steel. It was the truth she had never been given. That night, as the mountains burned crimson with sunset, she sat on the porch, the trunk of secrets beside her, Martha's quiet wisdom in the rocking chair, and inside, Robert's voice murmured into a secure line untouched for years. It's silent knife, he said. The circle is closing, the ghosts are stirring, I've told her she's ready. Catherine didn't hear him, but she felt it. The air itself carried the tension of something awakening. And so when the helicopter rotors thundered across the Afghan night days later, and she checked her gear one final time, she carried not just medical supplies, not just weapons, but the unshakable suspicion that this mission would not be what it seemed. The Chinook roared through the dark, mountains looming. The team sat in silence, their rituals steady. Reynolds, the commander, briefed with clipped words, reconnaissance only, observe, document, extract, no engagement unless necessary. But his eyes lingered on Catherine a moment too long. Stay in your lane, medic. She nodded, but unease coiled in her gut. Intel vague, priority unusually high, and Reynolds tighter than usual, his jaw locked with secrets. When they hit the ground, dust swirling in night vision glow, Catherine felt that same pull she had felt in the Blue Ridge. A sense, a whisper inside, something here was wrong. They moved through the mountains in silence, each footstep measured. Hours passed before they reached the ridge. Below them, a compound, empty, too empty, no smoke, no livestock, no life. Williams muttered, too quiet. Through her scope, Catherine saw the same, the dust undisturbed, the walls crumbling. Yet something felt fresh, recently used but wiped clean. Her words came softly, it's a trap. Reynolds's glance flickered. He didn't argue, just split the team, ordered her with Hernandez to sweep the southern buildings. Her boots whispered across broken ground. The rising sun painted the valley in long shadows. Inside a crumbling room, dust coated everything. Abandonment obvious. Yet her trained eyes caught it, a faint disturbance, a floor swept clean too recently. Hernandez, she whispered. Together they brushed the dust away. A trapdoor revealed. The report went out, the team gathered, weapons ready. When the ladder descended into a corridor carved in stone but lined with modern steel, Catherine's breath caught. This was Taliban. This wasn't local militia. This was something else. A keypad, Chen's expertise, a beep, a click, the door opened. Inside, computers still warm, papers scattered, coffee cups half finished. A medical station but not field medicine. Research, refrigeration units, vials of blood. Catherine's hand trembled as she pulled one open. Human samples, labels coded. Captain, she whispered, this isn't a clinic, this is research. Reynolds's face hardened. But before answers came, Cooper's voice cracked through the comms. Multiple vehicles, east, 15 combatants, not Taliban, too disciplined. The orders came sharp, pack up, 2 minutes, extraction plan Bravo. But Catherine's heart pounded louder than the gunfire that soon followed, because as she shoved those vials into her pack, she knew. This was no routine mission. This was her father's ghost rising from the dirt. Why did Reynolds pocket the folder without showing it to anyone? Catherine had seen it half buried beneath a desk, nearly overlooked in the underground facility. She had pulled it free, dust clinging to the edges. The captain's eyes had flickered the moment he saw the cover. He didn't even hesitate. He folded it, slipped it into his vest, and dismissed her question with a flat, "Not relevant to our current situation. Move out." But it was relevant. She felt it in her chest, and the way he avoided her gaze afterward only sharpened her suspicion. There was no time to push. Outside, engines roared, voices shouted, boots crunched gravel. Armed men swarmed the compound with the precision of trained soldiers. Not Taliban, not militia. These were professionals. Gunfire erupted. Mud brick walls cracked apart. Catherine dropped low as rounds chipped stone inches from her head. Williams's voice cut through the chaos, precise, commanding. "Contact, south wall." The team moved as one, suppressive fire exploding in disciplined bursts. Catherine clutched her pack tighter, the weight of the blood vials pressing into her back. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about protecting something someone wanted badly enough to kill for. Reynolds barked the order, "Break south, go." They ran, boots pounded, grenades echoed, dust filled the air. A secondary explosion ripped through the underground levels, far larger than anything Williams had set. Catherine staggered as the earth convulsed beneath her. The facility had been rigged from the start. Someone wanted it gone. The blast disoriented their attackers long enough for the team to break the perimeter. They vaulted walls, scrambled through dry irrigation ditches, sprinted until their lungs burned. Behind them, the compound roared into black smoke, secondary detonations sending shockwaves through the valley. They didn't stop until the sound of helicopters reached them, not the heavy thrum of their Chinook. No, this was higher-pitched, sharper hunting. Williams cursed, Heinz Russian. Catherine dropped into cover, heart hammering. The Mi-24 gunships swept the ridgeline, their silhouettes monstrous against the pale sky. Their weapons systems glinted in the light. Too close, too exposed. But they didn't fire. One hovered, a rope dropped, and from it a man descended. Catherine's pulse raced. He stood in the open, unarmed, faceless behind his gear, waiting. Reynolds made his decision without hesitation. He stepped forward. "Maintain overwatch, that's an order." She watched as her commander crossed open ground, meeting the stranger halfway. Their exchange was tense, low, unreadable. A nod, a glance, and then Reynolds turned back. "Change of plans," he announced flatly. "We're moving to tertiary extraction, 5 clicks northeast." Williams's jaw clenched. "Sir, who the hell was that, and why are Russian helicopters escorting us?" "Need to know," Reynolds snapped. "Move." But Catherine had seen it. Just before the stranger boarded the hind, his sleeve had shifted. A patch revealed, subtle, small, unmistakable. The same bird of prey emblem as her father's dog tag. Her gut twisted. This was no coincidence. The march northeast was brutal. Steep ridges, loose stone, thin air. Catherine's legs burned, but the pack never left her shoulders. She felt every ounce of responsibility with each step. Hernandez muttered behind her, "This doesn't smell right. Russians in Afghan airspace, escorting us instead of killing us. What the hell are we walking into?" No one answered. When they finally reached the valley designated as tertiary extraction, the unease had become suffocating. It was too exposed, too perfect. Williams confronted Reynolds openly. "Sir, with respect, this is wrong. You haven't reported to command. You're coordinating with Russians. Our mission parameters are blown. We deserve answers." For the first time, Reynolds's mask cracked. His tone shifted, lower, weightier. That facility wasn't supposed to exist. It was part of a joint program from the late 80s. Black operations, terminated, or so we were told. Catherine's breath caught. She heard her grandfather's voice, Blackthorn. The name slipped from her lips before she could stop it. Operation Blackthorn. Reynolds froze, his eyes locked on hers. Where did you hear that name? Her throat tightened, too late to take it back. My family told me. He said nothing more, just turned away, but his silence told her enough. Moments later, another hind swept in, dust spraying as it descended. Williams raised his weapon instinctively. That's not our ride. Stand down, Reynolds ordered, voice sharp. That's our extraction. The disbelief on the team's faces was nearly mutinous. Cooper shouted over the rotor wash. This is wrong. We need to report in. Reynolds faced them, jaw hard. What we found today doesn't go in any report. You have two choices. Get on that bird, or start an international incident that ends with all of us dead. Time slowed, dust whipped, the gunship loomed. One by one they moved. Chen, Cooper, Hernandez. Catherine hesitated, torn between instinct and survival. Williams caught her arm, his voice low. None of this is right. She met his eyes, voice steady. No, but we need to understand before we fight it. He nodded reluctantly, and together they climbed aboard. Inside, the air was tense. The pilot wore no insignia, just a patch on his shoulder, the same bird of prey, the same ghost that haunted her family. As the hind lifted, Catherine pressed her hand to her pack, heart pounding. Whatever this was, whatever she had just stepped into, it was bigger than missions, bigger than orders. It was her father's shadow, rising from the past. The helicopter didn't head for base. It carried them deeper into the mountains. Hours blurred into minutes as they descended into a hidden valley where figures emerged from camouflage. Soldiers, scientists, operatives with gear from a dozen countries but no flags, no names. A man stepped forward, broad-shouldered, weathered face, authority radiating from his posture. Reynolds greeted him like an old ally. We've been compromised, Reynolds said, but we have the samples. The man's eyes shifted to Catherine. You have them. Her hand tightened on the strap of her pack. Who are you? A faint smile ghosted his lips. Call me Clark. I command this operation. Behind Catherine, Williams muttered, barely audible. This isn't sanctioned. This isn't protocol. We're not supposed to be here. But they were. Escorted into a mountainside entrance, through scanners and steel, Catherine found herself in a facility that shouldn't exist. Modern halls, humming lights, screens alive with data. Men and women moved with purpose, some in tactical gear, others in lab coats. Clark's voice echoed. Welcome to Echo Station, one of the last Atlas outposts still operational. The words meant nothing to most of her team, but to Catherine they carried the chill of truth. Her grandfather had warned her. Ghosts that never died, shadows that waited for decades. Inside a conference room, faces awaited. A colonel, an intelligence officer, a woman with sharp eyes and a Russian surname, Dr. Elena Vyulov. Catherine set the vials on the table, her hand trembling only slightly. And when they spoke of Blackthorn, when they revealed that her father and grandfather had fought to contain a biological agent engineered to outlast time itself, she understood. The past was not past. It was alive, hunting them. And she was now part of it. Her inheritance was no longer a secret in a trunk. It was here, in her hands, in her blood. And as the voices droned on, about agents, about samples, about containment, Catherine's mind whispered the only truth she could hold on to. This was not a mission anymore. It was a reckoning. Why did every eye in the room turn cold when she spoke her father's name? James Harrington, she said softly, Phantom 27. The silence that followed felt like a physical blow. The colonel's gaze sharpened. The intelligence officer's pen froze mid-note. Even Reynolds, who had shown little emotion through firefights and explosions, went still. You shouldn't know that designation, Keller, the analyst, said evenly, though his voice carried a quiet threat. Those identities were sealed, even among us. Unless someone told her, that was the unspoken conclusion. Catherine met their suspicion with a steady calm she didn't feel. My grandfather told me, Robert Harrington, silent knife. The name rippled through the room like a suppressed detonation. Hayes, the colonel, leaned forward. His voice dropped, measured. Robert Harrington contacted you recently. Catherine's pulse raced, but her voice held. He told me the truth about my father, about Blackthorn. For a long moment, no one spoke. Clark exchanged a glance with Reynolds. Dr. Vyulov, the Russian scientist, studied the vials of blood she had placed on the table, her fingers trembling just slightly as she lifted them to the light. "These are intact," Vyulov whispered, relief softening her features. "We can proceed." Proceed with what? Catherine wanted to demand, but she knew better. Questions had a price here, so she waited. Hayes finally broke the silence. "You need context, Sergeant. What you found wasn't just a rogue lab. It was part of something much older, something buried so deep most governments have forgotten it exists." Catherine forced her voice steady. "Blackthorn." "Yes," Hayes nodded grimly. "In the late 80s, during the Soviet war in Afghanistan, a joint program was created. American and Soviet intelligence agreed on one thing: some biological weapons were too dangerous to risk. So they created a protocol to track, contain, and if necessary, destroy them. Phantom operatives like your father carried out those missions. Men and women who didn't officially exist." The words landed heavy. Her father's medals, her grandfather's silence, the childhood training disguised as games, it all aligned, clicking into place with painful precision. Dr. Vyulov spoke, her accent thickening under strain. "The agent recovered then was engineered for persistence, adaptable, resistant to countermeasures, designed to survive decades." She lifted the vial again, her eyes flashing. "And someone has been trying to wake it." Catherine's gut twisted. "And now you want me to help you?" Hayes studied her. "You're a medic, a soldier. You've proven adaptable under pressure. And your connection to Phantom Protocol gives you an understanding others don't." She shook her head slowly. "You want me to pick up where my father left off?" "No," Hayes corrected. "We want you to decide what you're willing to inherit." The words clung to her long after the meeting ended. They gave her quarters in a reinforced wing of the facility. Spartan but clean. A bunk, a locker, a small desk. Catherine sat alone, the pack with the samples resting at her feet, her hands trembling against her knees. Reynolds appeared in the doorway. He leaned on the frame, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You handled that well," he said. She didn't look up. "You knew, didn't you, before we even set foot in that compound?" His silence was answer enough. Catherine lifted her eyes, anger breaking through her restraint. "My team trusted you. Williams, Hernandez, Cooper. You dragged us into this without telling us the truth." Reynolds stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His voice was low, edged with something that might have been regret. "If I had told you, you would have reacted differently. And we needed you steady." "You mean compliant?" His jaw tightened. For the first time, she saw the man behind the commander, tired, worn, carrying burdens he couldn't set down. "This isn't about trust, Harrington. It's about survival. The less you know, the safer you are." She almost laughed. "Do you believe that?" He didn't answer. When he left, she sat in silence, the echo of his words gnawing at her. "Less you know, safer you are." It was the same excuse her grandfather had given. Protection dressed up as secrecy. But secrecy had a cost. Later, Dr. Vyulov summoned her to the lab. Catherine followed, wary but curious. The space was clinical, sterile, a sharp contrast to the rough mountain stone outside. Monitors glowed with data streams she couldn't interpret. The vials she had carried across gunfire and explosions were now catalogued in chilled racks. Vyulov studied one under magnification, her brow furrowed. These samples were analyzed recently. Someone was close to unlocking their dormant properties. Catherine's chest tightened. Unlocking for what? The scientist's eyes flicked to hers. Weaponization, always weaponization. A cold shiver ran down Catherine's spine. She had carried those vials like glass hearts. Now she understood their weight. They weren't just evidence. They were potential extinction. Vyulov placed a hand over Catherine. "You protected these. That matters." Catherine swallowed hard. She wanted to believe that. But as she left the lab, she saw Williams in the corridor. His posture was rigid, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with questions. "They're lying to us," he said flatly. She didn't argue, she couldn't. "They'll bury this," Williams continued. "Rewrite it, just like they did with every operation before, and we'll be pawns, disposable." Catherine's voice was quiet. "Then maybe it's up to us to decide what doesn't get buried." The words surprised even her, but once spoken they felt right. That night, as Echo Station hummed with unseen operations, Catherine lay awake in her bunk. The faces of her father and grandfather hovered in her mind. Silent Knife, Phantom 27, ghosts who had lived and died in shadows. And she wondered, was she destined to become one of them? Or was there another path? Sleep never came, only the whisper of her grandfather's warning. The circle is closing, the ghosts are stirring. And in the silence, Catherine made a quiet promise to herself. If she was to inherit this legacy, it would not be as a blind pawn. It would be as a watchful shadow, a witness, a voice. Even if that voice was never heard. Why did Williams glance at her, with the kind of trust he hadn't given anyone else since they landed in this mountain fortress? Because he knew she was just as unsettled as he was. Echo Station looked legitimate, reinforced steel, glowing monitors, personnel moving with clipped precision, but legitimacy was an illusion. Catherine felt it in the air, in the way conversations hushed when she entered, in the way Reynolds spoke less like a commander and more like a man following orders from shadows. That night she found Williams standing alone in one of the upper observation corridors. His silhouette leaned against the glass, the mountains outside black against the stars. He didn't turn when she approached. "You feel it too," he said quietly. She joined him at the window. "That none of this adds up. That we're trapped in something we can't control." He exhaled, his breath fogging the glass. "Our team deserves answers. Hernandez, Cooper, Chen, they're loyal, but loyalty cuts both ways. How long before they realize their loyalty being used against them?" Catherine didn't answer. She thought of Cooper's questioning eyes, of Hernandez muttering about things smelling wrong, of Chen watching the encrypted data streams with quiet suspicion. The team wasn't blind. They were waiting for someone to say it out loud. Williams finally turned. "You're carrying more than they know, aren't you?" Her instinct was to deflect, but his gaze was steady, piercing, the gaze of a man who had carried secrets of his own and knew their weight. Catherine lowered her voice. "Those vials, they're not just evidence. They're a weapon someone's been trying to wake." Williams's jaw tightened, and Reynolds knew. She nodded once. Silence stretched between them. Two soldiers, standing on the edge of loyalty and betrayal, neither ready to fall but both knowing gravity was pulling hard. Williams broke it with a bitter chuckle. "You ever get tired of being used, Harrington?" "All my life," she whispered. The next day, Dr. Vyulov requested Catherine's assistance in the lab. It was a thin pretense. Catherine wasn't a virologist, but Vyulov seemed intent on drawing her in. Together they cataloged the blood samples, Vyulov explaining the coded labels. Each vial represented not just a subject, but a story. Prisoners, villagers, perhaps soldiers long forgotten. None had volunteered. Catherine's stomach turned as she listened. Her hands trembled when she realized some of the samples were decades old, yet still viable. "How?" she asked, her voice strained. Vyulov's eyes flicked toward her. "It was designed this way, to endure, to adapt." "To survive us," Catherine murmured. The scientist didn't disagree. As she left the lab, she passed Reynolds in the hall. He stopped her with a hand against the wall, his eyes hard. "You've been asking questions," he said. Shouldn't I? His voice dropped lower, almost a plea. Careful, Harrington, you don't know how deep this goes. She stared at him, then tell me. But he didn't. He just stepped aside and walked away, leaving her with the echo of unspoken warnings. That evening, a briefing was held in the main operations center. Clark stood at the head of the room, flanked by Hayes and Keller, Reynolds at his side. The rest of her team sat scattered around the long table, their uniforms still dusty from the mountains but their eyes sharp, restless. Clark's words were clipped. As of today, your official mission is complete. You will be rotated back to your base with a modified report. Nothing of significance was found at the compound. Routine reconnaissance. The words hit like a betrayal. Hernandez frowned. Cooper shifted in her chair. Chen's eyes narrowed. Williams didn't move, but Catherine saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. Reynolds spoke next, his tone smooth. Your loyalty has been exemplary, but from this point forward what you witnessed is classified beyond record. You will not speak of it, not to command, not to family, not even to each other. The silence in the room was suffocating. Catherine felt her chest tighten. Finally, Williams spoke. With respect, sir, that's not how this works. We don't just erase what we've seen. Reynolds's gaze hardened. It is now. The meeting ended in tense silence. They filed out, each soldier carrying the weight of orders that felt more like shackles. Later, in the dim light of the barracks, Hernandez muttered under his breath, "They're lying through their teeth." Cooper nodded grimly. "We walked into something dirty." Chen rubbed his temples, his voice quiet. "The encryption on those servers, American. I recognized the architecture. Whatever that facility was, it was Taliban. It was us." The truth sat heavy among them. Catherine didn't speak. She didn't need to. They already knew. When the lights dimmed for the enforced rest cycle, Catherine slipped from her bunk. Williams was waiting in the corridor, as if he had known she would come. Together they moved in silence through the winding halls, careful to avoid cameras and patrols. They reached a storage room near the lower levels. Williams closed the door, the darkness wrapping around them. He spoke first. "We need to get out of here before they decide we're liabilities." Catherine's pulse quickened. The thought had been growing in her mind too, but hearing it said aloud made it real. "They'll come after us," she said. Williams nodded. "They already are. You think those contractors who hit the compound were just coincidence? Someone leaked the mission. Someone wanted us there and then wanted us silenced." Her breath caught. Reynolds. He didn't deny it. The weight of betrayal pressed down, heavier than any pack. Catherine's throat tightened. She thought of her father, her grandfather, the decades of service, the warnings, ghosts stirring, circles closing. "What about the others?" she asked. "Hernandez, Cooper, Chen." Williams's jaw set. "If we take them, we'll never make it. Too many, too loud. We move quiet, just us." The words stung. But deep down, Catherine knew he was right. The others were brave, loyal, but they weren't ready for this shadow war. Not yet. Williams leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "We get out. We take the samples. We find someone we can trust, your grandfather maybe. Whoever still has clean hands. We blow the whistle." Her pulse hammered. Fear and resolve collided in her chest. She thought of the dog tag in her pocket. Phantom 27, her father's ghost. And she whispered the only answer she could, "I'm in." That night, as Echo Station slept beneath the weight of its secrets, two soldiers began to plan their escape. They didn't know if they'd survive. They didn't know who would hunt them. But Catherine knew one thing with certainty. She would not let her inheritance be used to poison the future, even if it cost her everything. Why did the air feel heavier the moment they stepped out of the barracks, as if the walls themselves were watching? Because Echo Station was not a place built for leaving. Catherine adjusted the strap of her pack, its weight sharper tonight than ever before. Inside, the vials were wrapped in cloth, close to her body, beating against her ribs like a second heart. Beside her, Williams moved with silent precision, his expression tight, every glance over his shoulder carved with suspicion. The halls were dim in enforced night cycle, but cameras hummed faintly above doorways. Williams led the way, his movements quick, sure. He had studied the patterns. Guards rotated every 30 minutes. The labs dimmed from 2 until 4, the only time they might slip through. They passed the lab where Dr. Vulov worked. Through the narrow glass, Catherine saw the scientist asleep at her desk, head resting on folded arms, monitors glowing with streams of unreadable data. For a moment, Catherine's chest tightened. Vulov had treated her kindly. She wasn't sure if the woman was complicit or trapped like them, but there was no time for hesitation. Williams touched her arm, urging her forward. The service corridors smelled of metal and oil. Pipes rattled overhead. They followed a narrow stairwell down 2 levels, their boots soundless against the concrete. At the bottom, a door with a keypad. Williams pulled a small device from his pocket, scavenged from Chen during a casual exchange days earlier. He pressed it to the panel. A soft click, then green. The lock released. They slipped into a storage bay lined with crates and tarps. Through a slit in the canvas, Catherine saw the faint outline of armored vehicles. Beyond them, the steel bulk of the outer gate, their exit. For a fleeting second, freedom seemed possible. Then a voice cut the silence. "Going somewhere." Reynolds stepped from the shadows. His pistol was steady, his eyes colder than she had ever seen. Behind him, 2 guards leveled rifles. Williams froze. Catherine's heart dropped. Reynolds's voice was almost calm. "You think you're the first to try this. You think Echo Station is a hotel you can check out of. No one leaves without authorization." Her chest tightened. Authorization to do what exactly? Carry secrets you don't trust us with. Bury the truth like my father was buried. For the first time, his eyes flickered, but only for a moment. "You don't understand the scale of this," Reynolds said. "If this leaks, governments collapse, alliances fracture, people die." Williams's voice cut sharp. "People are already dying. You're just keeping score from the shadows." The tension snapped in a single second. Williams moved, a blur of motion. He slammed into Reynolds's arm, the pistol discharging into the ceiling. Catherine dropped low, sweeping her weapon free, a round dropping 1 guard before he could react. The second fired wild, bullets sparking against metal. Williams grappled Reynolds, their struggle brutal, raw. Catherine rolled behind a crate, firing 2 shots that silenced the second guard. The echoes boomed in the enclosed bay. Then silence. Williams stood over Reynolds, his pistol pressed to the man's temple. His chest heaved with fury. "End it," he snarled. Reynolds didn't flinch. "Go ahead, kill me, and when they find you, they'll carve the truth into something you won't recognize." Catherine rose slowly. Her hands trembled on her weapon. Her heart pounded. She had never hated anyone the way she hated Reynolds in that moment, not for his lies, but for how he had twisted loyalty into chains. Williams's finger tightened. "Stop," Catherine whispered. He looked at her wild-eyed. "After everything he's done." "If we kill him, we become exactly what they are," she said. Her voice broke, but she didn't lower her aim. "We don't bury truth with bodies, we carry it." For a long, agonizing moment, the only sound was their ragged breathing. Then Williams lowered the pistol, his shoulders collapsing under the weight of restraint. Reynolds's smirk was faint but cutting. "You'll regret that." They bound him instead. A length of cord from a crate, wrists tight, gagged. Catherine's hands shook as she tied the knots, her mind screaming at the danger of leaving him alive. But she forced herself through it. Minutes later, they reached the outer gate. Williams keyed the panel. The massive steel doors shuddered, groaned, then split open. Cold mountain air rushed in. They ran. Snow crunched beneath their boots. The sky was pale with starlight, the peaks jagged shadows. Their breath came in clouds, white against black. Every instinct screamed that they were already being hunted. 2 ridges away, headlights flared. Engines growled. "They know," Catherine gasped. "Keep moving," Williams barked. They plunged into the dark, weaving through jagged stone, sliding down loose shale. Bullets cracked behind them, ricocheting against rock. Searchlights swept the slopes. Catherine's chest burned, her legs screamed, but she kept her pack tight, never letting the vials shift. Every step was for more than herself now, for her father, for the truth. A flare burst overhead, painting the mountains blood red. Shouts echoed, dogs barked. They dove into a ravine, sliding into shadow. Williams dragged her beneath an overhang of rock. They crouched in silence as boots thundered past above them, searchlights slicing the dark. Catherine pressed her forehead to the cold stone, her heart pounding like a drum. Williams's hand gripped her shoulder, steadying her. "We can't outrun them forever," he whispered. She nodded. She knew. But she also knew this. She would not stop, not until she delivered the truth to someone who could not bury it. Above them the searchlights moved on, for now. They slipped deeper into the mountains, shadows swallowing them whole. Behind them, Echo Station woke in fury, alarms wailing, soldiers mobilizing. Ahead of them, only uncertainty. But Catherine carried the weight like armor, her inheritance, her burden. And in the dark she whispered to herself, steady as a vow, "They will not bury this, not again." Why did William slow down when every instinct screamed at them to keep running? Because he heard something Catherine didn't. They had been moving for hours, their bodies pushed past the edge of exhaustion, the mountains swallowing them in endless ridges and shadowed valleys. Their breaths tore like fire, their boots slipped on ice and shale, but still they moved. The night was no ally. It amplified every sound, the crunch of snow, the echo of distant engines, the chop of rotor blades sweeping the valleys in slow, predatory arcs. Catherine stumbled against a boulder, her legs shaking, her lungs clawing for air. She pressed her pack against her chest as if the weight might steady her. Williams grabbed her arm, pulling her down into the snow. "Listen," he hissed. She held her breath. At first nothing but the rasp of her pulse in her ears, then faint, low, steady, the crunch of boots moving in formation, not far. Her throat went dry. Williams's voice was barely audible. "They're flanking us, 2 teams closing in." "How many?" "Too many." The truth pressed heavy in her chest. They couldn't outrun trained pursuit teams with air support. Not forever. Williams's jaw clenched. "We need to split, draw them off." "No," she whispered fierce. "We stay together." His eyes burned into hers, a mix of anger and something softer. "If we don't, they'll box us in and finish it. You're carrying the truth, Harrington. You're the one who gets out." Her voice cracked. "You think I'll just leave you behind?" "This isn't about me. It's about stopping them, about making sure what your father started doesn't die in a mountain ravine." He gripped her shoulder, steady, grounding. "You were born into this, Catherine. I was. My fight ends here if it has to. Yours doesn't." She wanted to argue, to scream at him, but the sound of boots grew louder, closer. Shadows flickered across the snow above them. Williams pressed his pistol into her hand. "Go." Her hands shook as she gripped the cold steel. Her voice was a whisper torn from her chest. "Don't you dare make me carry this alone." His lips curved in something between a grim smile and a farewell. "You already do." Before she could stop him, he rose from cover, firing sharp, precise bursts into the dark. Shouts erupted. Bullets cracked. Williams's silhouette darted across the snow, drawing the hunters with him. Catherine bit down hard, tears burning hot against the freezing air. Her body screamed to follow. But her mind, her father's voice, her grandfather's warnings forced her still. She pressed herself into the shadows, heart pounding as the pursuit veered after Williams. His gunfire faded, replaced by shouts, then silence broken by one last burst of automatic fire. And then nothing. The night swallowed him. Catherine sat frozen, every muscle trembling, her chest heaving with grief she couldn't afford. The mountains were merciless. They gave no time to mourn, only to move. She forced herself up, each step a betrayal of the man who had given her his last chance. Snow muffled her tracks as she climbed higher, searching for cover for escape. Hours blurred into aching, endless minutes. Her body moved on instinct, guided by training and desperation. At dawn, she found a cave, half hidden by drifts of snow. She crawled inside, the cold stone biting through her uniform. She set the pack down, cradling it in her arms as if it were life itself. Only then did the tears come, silent, shaking, for Williams, for the weight of survival, for the legacy she had never asked for. She whispered into the hollow dark, her breath fogging the air, "I'm sorry." The cave became her sanctuary for the day. She melted snow for water, forced herself to chew dry rations, her body desperate for fuel. Her thoughts spiraled, Williams's last words, her grandfather's warnings, her father's shadow. The ghosts pressed close. By nightfall she moved again. The mountains were a maze and she was the hunted. Flares burst in the distance. Helicopters swept valleys with searchlights, but Catherine learned to move like the deer she had once spared in the Blue Ridge, silent, patient, vanishing into the terrain. Still, fear gnawed at her. Every crunch of snow behind her felt like pursuit. Every shadow looked like Reynolds's smirk. 2 nights later, her fear became truth. She had descended into a narrow pass, moonlight glinting off frozen stone when voices echoed ahead. Not English, Russian. 2 men, rifles slung, moving with the ease of hunters who knew their prey was near. Catherine's pulse spiked. She pressed into the stone, her body melding with shadow. The men stopped, scanning the pass with night vision. One raised a radio, words crackled. Catherine caught fragments, female alive samples. Her blood went cold. They weren't just hunting her, they knew what she carried. Her hand tightened on the pistol Williams had given her. But a single pistol against 2 rifles. She had seconds, no more. The choice pressed like a blade. Fight and risk capture, or vanish and risk losing the only lead she had. Then she saw it above the pass, a ledge heavy with snow, cracks threading its surface. Her heart pounded. It was reckless, but survival wasn't clean. She shifted, drawing the pistol, firing one shot not at them but into the crack. The mountains roared. Snow and rock cascaded down, swallowing the pass in an avalanche. Shouts cut off in an instant. Silence followed. Her chest heaved. She stared at the white ruin, her hands trembling. She had killed again, not in combat, not face to face, but with the mountains themselves. It felt nothing like the clean precision of a rifle on a range. It felt raw, brutal, necessary. And it marked her. When the echoes faded, she turned away, pushing deeper into the wilderness. Each step was heavier, each breath colder. But Catherine knew now there was no turning back. She was alone. Williams was gone. The hunters would not stop. And somewhere ahead, there had to be someone left she could trust, someone who would not bury the truth like the rest. Her whisper cut through the frozen air, steady and fragile all at once. "Don't let me fail, Dad." The mountains carried the vow. Why did the lights of the village ahead feel more like a trap than a refuge? Because Catherine had learned the hard way that safety was an illusion. She stumbled down the ridge, her body hollowed by days of running. Snow caked her boots, blood stiffened her sleeve where rock had torn through. The pack weighed like stone, every step a battle of will against gravity. Her face was raw from wind and sleepless nights. But the sight of lanterns glowing in the valley, faint, flickering yellow, pulled her forward. She entered the village at dawn. Mud brick homes huddled together, smoke curling from chimneys, goats bleating in pens. The people watched her with wary eyes, a stranger carrying a soldier's posture. Catherine lowered her weapon, raised her empty hand. "Water," she whispered, her throat cracked from cold and silence. An old woman approached, shawl wrapped tight. Her eyes read Catherine with something between suspicion and pity. She gestured her inside a low-roofed house. The warmth of a fire nearly broke her. She sank to her knees, the heat thawing pain she had numbed. The woman pressed a bowl of broth into her hands. Catherine drank greedily, tears burning her eyes at the taste of salt and herbs. For the first time since Williams vanished into the night, she felt almost human. But safety lasted only hours. That evening, as she sat near the fire, she heard it, the thrum of rotors, helicopters sweeping the valley. The villagers tensed. The old woman met Catherine's gaze, then pressed a hand to her shoulder, gentle, insistent. "Hide." Catherine crawled into a storage alcove behind stacked grain sacks, her pack clutched to her chest. The door burst open. Voices filled the room, English this time. Hard, clipped. "Reynolds." Her pulse spiked. She pressed herself deeper into shadow as his boots crossed the floor. "She came through here," he said, voice sharp. "Search every house. She's carrying something critical." The old woman protested in Pashto, her voice rising. A slap cut her words short. Catherine bit down hard on her lip, rage burning hot against the ice in her veins. Boots pounded. Soldiers overturned crates, flung open doors, shouted to each other. One stepped into her alcove. His flashlight beam sliced through the dark, missing her by inches. She held her breath, muscles trembling, sweat freezing on her neck. Then Reynolds's voice called him back. "Move, she's not here." The soldier cursed and withdrew. Minutes stretched into lifetimes. Finally, silence. The helicopters faded into distance. Catherine emerged, her body shaking. The old woman sat on the floor, cheek red from the slap, eyes steady. Catherine knelt before her, whispering words she knew the woman couldn't understand. "I won't let them win. I swear it." The next night she left the village. She couldn't bring danger to them again. Her path led her south, toward a covert NATO outpost she remembered from mission maps. If anyone outside Echo Station could be trusted, it would be them. The journey took 2 days. She crossed ridges, waded icy rivers, endured hunger until her stomach cramped. Every step carried Williams's voice beside her, steady, urging, "You're the one who gets out." At last she saw it, camouflage netting over prefab huts, antennas spearing skyward. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their uniforms familiar. Relief nearly buckled her knees. She approached slowly, weapon lowered, hands raised. "Sergeant Catherine Harrington," she called out hoarsely. "U.S. Army, I need to speak to your co." The guards froze, then hurried her inside. The outpost commander, Major Daniels, met her in a cramped briefing room. His eyes widened at her condition. "My God, Harrington, they reported your team KIA. What happened?" She told him not everything, not the deepest shadows, but enough. The ambush at the compound, the hidden lab, Echo Station, Reynolds's betrayal, Williams's sacrifice. Daniels listened, face tight with disbelief and anger. This is above my clearance, but if you're telling me the truth." "I have proof." Catherine placed the vials on the table, the glass glinting under the weak lights. "This is what they were hiding." Daniels stared. For a moment she thought he would push them back, refuse to touch the weight of them. Instead, he nodded grimly. "We'll get these to higher command. You've done the right thing, Sergeant." For the first time in days, Catherine allowed herself a breath of hope. They gave her a cot, hot food, the simple grace of a shower. She stood under the water, trembling as the dirt and blood washed away. For a fleeting moment, she let herself believe the nightmare was ending. But the nightmare wasn't done with her. That night, as she drifted into exhausted sleep, the outpost shook with explosions. Sirens wailed. Shouts tore through the dark. Catherine bolted upright, heart slamming. Gunfire erupted outside, the crack of rifles, the thump of grenades. She grabbed her weapon, sprinting into chaos. Smoke choked the air. The huts burned, shadows of men clashing in the firelight. Not Taliban, not local militia, too precise, too clean. Through the smoke she saw him. Reynolds. His eyes found hers, cold and unwavering even as fire painted his face. He had followed her. The outpost was already falling. Daniels lay crumpled near the command tent. Soldiers scattered, cut down in crossfire. Catherine's chest burned with fury, grief, and a bitter truth: nowhere was safe. She ducked into the command hut, her mind racing. The vials. They were still on the table where she had left them. She swept them into her pack just as the wall blew inward, fire and dust swallowing the room. She stumbled into the night, ears ringing, vision blurred. The pack weighed heavier now, as if the ghosts inside screamed to be carried. Reynolds's voice cut through the smoke, calm, cold. "Harrington, stop running, you're only prolonging this." Her answer was a burst of fire into the shadows, forcing him to cover. She ran, past burning huts, past fallen soldiers, into the Black Mountains once more. Her breath tore from her throat, her legs screamed. Behind her, the outpost collapsed into fire and silence. She was alone again, betrayal closing in on all sides. But she carried the truth, and as long as she carried it, the fight wasn't lost. In the darkness, she whispered into the wind, a vow carved from grief and fury. "I'll end this, even if I have to burn with it." Why did the fire behind her feel quieter than the storm inside her chest? Because Catherine knew the outpost's destruction wasn't the end. It was the beginning of her final stand. She pushed into the mountains, lungs ragged, legs refusing but obeying anyway. The vials clinked in her pack, each sound a reminder of why she couldn't stop. The night pressed close, cold and merciless, but she welcomed it. Darkness was the only ally she had left. For 2 days she moved through valleys and ridges, hunted but unseen. Helicopters swept the skis, convoys crawled through passes, boots tracked her prints only to lose them in stone. She had become a ghost like her father, her grandfather, a shadow slipping between history and survival. But ghosts could not run forever. It happened on the 3rd night. She reached an abandoned Soviet outpost, concrete crumbling, rusted steel doors sagging against the wind. It was shelter. Barely. She slipped inside, set her pack down, and let her head rest against the wall. A voice broke the silence. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Her body snapped awake, pistol in hand. Reynolds stepped from the shadows, rifle steady, his face carved from stone. Behind him, 2 contractors flanked the door. She was trapped. Her chest heaved, but her voice was steady. "How many more do you need to bury, Reynolds? How many more lies?" His eyes flickered, a rare crack in the mask. "This isn't about lies. It's about survival. Nations survive because people like me keep secrets buried. And people like Williams die for them," she spat. For the first time, the name shook him. A muscle twitched in his jaw, but his rifle didn't waver. "Hand over the pack," he said. She looked down at it, the glass hearts inside, the inheritance, the poison, her father's ghost. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from the weight of choice. Slowly she lifted the pack, then hurled it against the far wall. Glass shattered. The vials burst, their contents spreading across concrete. Reynolds froze, shock flashing in his eyes. "What have you done?" Her voice broke, but her resolve held. "I ended it. No more pawns, no more ghosts." He lunged forward, desperate, but she was faster. Her pistol roared, 1, 2, 3 shots. The first slammed into his shoulder, the second into his chest, the third dropped him to the floor. His rifle clattered against concrete, his breath rattling, eyes wide in disbelief. The contractors fired, but Catherine was already moving. A dive behind crumbling cover, return fire precise, fueled not by rage but clarity. 2 bodies dropped in the dust. Silence fell again. Reynolds coughed, blood flecking his lips. He stared up at her, eyes clouded with fury and something like sorrow. "You think you stopped it," he rasped. "There are more labs, more samples. You destroyed 1 pack, Harrington. The machine keeps turning." Her voice was quiet, Then I'll keep fighting." He tried to speak again, but the words never came. His chest stilled, his eyes glassed. For a long moment, Catherine stood over him, her pistol trembling in her hand. This was no victory, no triumph, only another ghost added to her inheritance. She dropped the pistol, sank to her knees, let the silence press down. Hours passed. The fire of battle faded, leaving only the cold. She sat with the broken glass, the ruined samples, the bodies of men who had lived in shadows and died in them too. At dawn she rose. She walked out of the outpost, leaving Reynolds behind. The mountain stretched before her, endless, merciless, but she walked anyway. She had no map, no orders, no safe house waiting. But she had herself. She carried Williams's sacrifice, her grandfather's warnings, her father's ghost. And most of all, she carried the truth, not in vials or files, but in memory, in resolve. She would not let them bury it. Not again. Days later, she reached a border town, blending into the noise of markets, the hum of life that knew nothing of what had been fought for in the mountains. She looked ordinary now, a traveler, a survivor. No one saw the shadows in her eyes. She sent a single message, encrypted, routed through channels her grandfather had taught her. A message not to governments, not to generals, but to someone she believed might still have clean hands. "They will not stop, but neither will I." And then she vanished. A ghost. Like her father. Like her grandfather. But not buried. Alive. Carrying the fight in silence. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.